Everyone wants to know about Roosevelt. What was he like? Was he really that brave? Did he actually charge up that hill on horseback? I'll tell you about Roosevelt. But first, I need to tell you who I was before I met him. I'm 54 years old now. The year Roosevelt died, 1919, I got drunk for 3 days straight. Not because I loved the man, because I hated what he'd made me remember. William Hayes, San Antonio, Texas, son of a cattle rancher who lost everything in the panic of '93. By the time I was 18, I was working as a ranch hand on land my father used to own, breaking horses for the man who'd bought him out. Pride's a funny thing. It can eat you alive when you're young. When the war with Spain came in 1988, I was 20 years old and looking for a way out. Any way out. Then Roosevelt came through Texas recruiting for his volunteer cavalry regiment. The Rough Riders, they called them. Cowboys and college boys fighting side by side. Adventure and glory in Cuba. I showed up to enlist the first day. Figured anything was better than watching my father drink himself to death while working another man's cattle. Roosevelt himself looked me over, checked my hands for calluses, asked if I could shoot, asked if I could ride. I told him I'd been in the saddle since I was 6 years old. Good, he said, flashing those teeth. We need men who can fight from horseback. This won't be a parade ground war. He was right about that. I went to Cuba a boy looking for something, purpose, glory, a way to matter. Met Theodore Roosevelt again on a hilltop covered in blood and dead men, and learned that some things you can't ever unknow, no matter how many years go by or how hard you try to forget. We trained in San Antonio for about 6 weeks before shipping out. Roosevelt was there every day, drilling us, riding with us, acting like we were already the best cavalry regiment in the Army. He had this energy about him. Couldn't sit still, always moving, always talking. The college boys from the East loved him. Us cowboys thought he was a little crazy, but the good kind of crazy. Bully, he'd shout whenever something went right. Absolutely bully. We shipped out to Cuba in June. Most of the regiment had to leave their horses behind. Not enough room on the transports. We went from cavalry to infantry just like that. Roosevelt was furious about it, but there was nothing to be done. Only the officers kept their mounts. We landed at Daiquiri and started marching inland. The heat was something else. Made Texas in August feel like springtime. Jungle so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Men started dropping from heat stroke before we even saw a Spanish soldier. June 24th, we hit the Spanish at Las Guasimas. First real fight. We were moving through a valley when they opened up on us from the ridges. Smokeless powder. You couldn't see where the shots were coming from, just men falling in that crack, crack, crack of Mauser rifles. I saw Roosevelt in the middle of it, on foot because the terrain was too rough for horses, pushing forward through the brush like he couldn't understand why everyone else was taking cover. Shouting orders, waving his hat, completely exposed. Either the bravest man I'd ever seen or the craziest. Maybe both. We took casualties. Tom Isbell from New Mexico, shot through the lungs, dead before he hit the ground. Sergeant Hamilton Fish from New York, one of those college boys, took a bullet to the hip. Died later that night, screaming. That was my first time hearing a man die slow. Wouldn't be my last. We drove the Spanish back, called it a victory. Roosevelt was elated, congratulating everyone, calling us heroes. I just kept thinking about Fish's screaming. Kept seeing Isbell's surprised face when the bullet hit him. That was just the warm-up. The real test came a week later, July 1st, 1898. San Juan Hill. That's the day I met the real Theodore Roosevelt. Not the politician, not the writer, not the man in the newspapers. The man who would walk through hell and drag you with him because he genuinely believed it was the right thing to do. July 1st started in confusion. We were supposed to be supporting the regulars, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the black soldiers everyone called Buffalo Soldiers. But the jungle trails were narrow. Units got mixed up, and by the time we reached the battlefield, everything was chaos. We came out of the jungle into a clearing at the base of Kettle Hill. Spanish were dug in on top, maybe 500 yards away. Between us and them was open ground. Tall grass, a few scattered trees, and nothing else. No cover, just a killing field. The orders were confused. Wait for support. Move forward. Hold position. Nobody seemed to know what we were supposed to do. So we just lay there in that grass, taking fire, men dying while we waited for someone to make a decision. Roosevelt was on his horse. Little Texas, he called it. Only mounted officer I could see. Made him a hell of a target, but he didn't seem to care. He kept riding up and down behind our line, trying to get clear orders, getting more frustrated by the minute. "We can't stay here," I heard him shouting at a regular Army captain. "We're being murdered. We need to advance or fall back." The captain was saying something about waiting for orders when a bullet took him in the shoulder. Just like that, the decision was made. Roosevelt wheeled his horse around. "Are you afraid to stand up?" he shouted at us. Not angry, genuinely asking, like he couldn't understand why we weren't already moving. "Are you afraid to move forward?" Then he started riding toward the hill. Alone, on horseback, straight at the Spanish positions. For a second, nobody moved. We just watched this crazy son of a bitch trotting toward enemy lines by himself. Then someone, I think it was Captain O'Neill, shouted, "Come on," and we all got up and followed him. It wasn't courage, it was something else. You couldn't let him go alone. Couldn't let him die out there by himself, because then you'd have to live with that for the rest of your life. So we ran after him, a whole regiment of men charging uphill because one man was too stubborn or too brave or too crazy to stay down. The Spanish fire was murderous. Men dropped with every step. I saw Billy McGinty from Arizona stumble and fall, clutching his stomach. Saw Jake Henderson get hit in the face, just gone. His whole face just gone. The bullets made this snapping sound when they passed close, like someone cracking a whip next to your ear. Roosevelt's horse got hit about halfway up. The animal screamed. That's a sound you never forget, a horse screaming, and went down hard. Roosevelt rolled clear, came up with his revolver in his hand, and kept going on foot. Didn't even slow down. We hit a wire fence about 100 yards from the Spanish trenches. Men got tangled in it, easy targets, getting shot while they tried to climb through. I vaulted over, caught my pant leg, nearly went down. Someone grabbed my arm, never knew who, and pulled me through. The last 50 yards were the worst. Completely exposed, running uphill, Spanish shooting down at us point blank. Roosevelt was ahead of most of us, incredibly, still pushing forward. I saw him stop to shoot, actually stop and aim his revolver, then keep running. I made it to the top somehow. Don't remember the last 20 yards, don't remember climbing into their trench. Just remember suddenly being there, fighting with rifle butt and bayonet in close quarters. A Spanish soldier came at me with his rifle raised, and I shot him in the chest from maybe 3 feet away. Saw his eyes go wide, saw him fall. We drove them off the hill, drove them back to their secondary positions. Won. That's when I found Roosevelt standing on the edge of the captured trench, looking out at the field we'd just crossed, looking at all the bodies, our boys, scattered across that hillside like discarded toys. He was breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "By God," he said, "wasn't that magnificent?" I looked at the bodies, looked at the blood, looked at Billy McGinty lying face down in the grass, dead at 23. Magnificent. That's the word he used. We held Kettle Hill for the rest of the day while the fighting continued around us. The Marines and regulars took San Juan Hill proper, the higher one next to ours. Roosevelt kept wanting to push forward, keep attacking, But the generals finally got some sense and told us to dig in. So we dug, used bayonets, tin cups, bare hands. The Spanish were shelling us from their fallback positions. Artillery rounds coming in, tearing up the ground, tearing up men. We'd won the hill, and now we were dying on it. Roosevelt was everywhere, checking on the wounded, organizing the defenses, rallying the men. He found me helping carry wounded down to the aid station and grabbed my shoulder. "Good work, Hayes. Proud of you boys. We showed them today, didn't we?" I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. The man I was carrying, Private Collins from Oklahoma, had taken shrapnel to his legs, both of them mangled beyond saving. He kept asking if he'd be able to walk again, kept asking if he'd be able to go home and work his father's farm. I lied to him, told him he'd be fine. Roosevelt stood there grinning, talking about how well we'd fought, while Collins bled through the bandages. That night, Roosevelt gathered some of us together. We were exhausted, filthy, half dead from heat and fear and fighting. He looked fresh as morning somehow, eyes bright, that endless energy still burning. "I want you men to know," he said, "that today was the great day of my life. The greatest honor I've ever known, leading you boys up that hill. When I'm old and gray, I'll remember this day as the finest moment of my existence." Some of the boys nodded, smiled, felt proud to hear it. I looked at the field hospital behind us, where Collins and dozens like him were screaming, where the surgeons were cutting off limbs by lantern light, where men were dying from wounds and fever and infection. The finest moment of his existence. We spent 2 more weeks on those hills. The Spanish surrendered Santiago, and Roosevelt treated it like a grand adventure concluded successfully. He wrote letters home that got published in the newspapers, gave interviews about the charge. The Rough Riders became famous. He became famous. But every day more men died. Not from Spanish bullets now, from disease. Yellow fever swept through the regiment like wildfire. Malaria, dysentery. Men who'd survived the charge just wasted away in field hospitals, shitting themselves to death, burning up with fever. Charlie Younger from my squad made it through the battle without a scratch. Dead from yellow fever 10 days later. I held his hand while he died, delirious, calling for his wife. He was 24 years old. Roosevelt got promoted, became a national hero, started his political career on the foundation of San Juan Hill. The other officers, they loved him, said he was the bravest man they'd ever seen, said he deserved every bit of glory he got. Maybe he did. Maybe that charge really was magnificent, like he said. But I kept thinking about Collins asking if he'd walk again. Kept thinking about Charlie Younger dying of fever, crying for his wife. Kept thinking about all those bodies on the hillside. Roosevelt saw glory. I saw graves. I'm not sure we were at the same battle. My breaking point came 3 days before we shipped home. August 12th, 1898. The war was over. Spain had surrendered. We'd won. Roosevelt organized a group photograph. Wanted the whole regiment together, all the surviving Rough Riders, to commemorate our great victory. We gathered on the same hill we'd taken, Kettle Hill, for the picture. I stood in the back row looking at the camera. Roosevelt was front and center, of course, grinning that grin. Around him were the officers, the college boys, the survivors, maybe half the men who'd landed in Cuba. The rest were dead or dying in hospitals or already shipped home missing limbs. The photographer set up his equipment. Roosevelt kept adjusting people, making sure everyone could be seen, treating it like it was the most important thing in the world, like this photograph mattered more than anything. "Smile, boys," he called out. "Show them what American heroes look like." I couldn't do it, couldn't smile, couldn't pretend this was something to celebrate. I looked around at that hill, the same ground where Billy McGinty had died clutching his stomach, where Jake Henderson had lost his face, where we'd killed Spanish boys who probably didn't want to be there any more than we did. Roosevelt noticed me. "Hayes, buck up there. This is a moment for the ages. A moment for the ages." I thought about Collins, who'd lost both legs and would never work his father's farm. Thought about Charlie Younger, dead from fever in a tent. Thought about Tom Isbell at Las Guasimas, dead before the battle even really started. Thought about that Spanish soldier I'd shot in the chest at 3 feet, the way his eyes looked when he realized he was dying. "Hayes," Roosevelt called again, laughing now. "Don't look so glum. We won." Something broke inside me then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet snap, like a wire pulled too tight for too long, finally giving way. We won. He really believed it. That's what made it worse. He wasn't lying or pretending. He genuinely saw all of this, the death, the suffering, the waste, as a great adventure that we should be proud of. He'd gotten what he wanted out of Cuba: glory, fame, a story to tell. And he couldn't understand why the rest of us weren't as happy about it as he was. The photograph was taken. I don't know if I managed to smile or not. Don't remember. My mind was somewhere else by then, somewhere far away, where Roosevelt's voice couldn't reach me. After the photo, he came around shaking hands, thanking us individually. When he got to me, he gripped my hand hard, looked me in the eye. "You're a hell of a soldier, Hayes. I'm proud to have served with you. We'll never forget this, will we? The greatest adventure of our lives." I nodded, said, "No, sir, we won't forget." That much was true. I haven't forgotten a single day of it. Haven't been able to forget no matter how hard I've tried. But I don't think we're remembering the same thing. He remembered glory. I remember graves. He remembered the greatest adventure of his life. I remember the day mine ended. I came home to San Antonio in September 1898. There was a parade, not as big as the ones in New York or Washington, but big enough. People cheering, bands playing, girls waving handkerchiefs. "Hero of San Juan Hill," they called me. Someone pinned a ribbon on my chest. I stood there and smiled and waved, played the part. That's what they wanted, a hero, not a haunted man who couldn't sleep, who flinched at loud noises, who saw dead faces every time he closed his eyes. I went back to ranch work, tried to anyway. Lasted about 4 months before the foreman let me go, said I was unreliable. What he meant was I'd disappear for hours sometimes, just staring at nothing. What he meant was I'd startled so bad when a horse whinnied that I'd nearly broken another hand's nose. What he meant was I wasn't the same man who'd left. He was right. I wasn't. Over the years, I tried different things, worked cattle drives, tried mining in Colorado, spent 2 years as a deputy sheriff in New Mexico, figured the gun might feel natural after the war. It didn't. Every time I drew it, I saw that Spanish soldier's eyes going wide. I quit before I had to shoot anyone. I never married. Came close once. Girl named Sarah in Santa Fe, sweet thing, patient with my moods. But how do you explain to someone that you can't be in crowds? That fireworks on the 4th of July make you want to crawl into a hole? That you wake up screaming 3 nights a week? She deserved better than a broken man. Meanwhile, Roosevelt became president. I followed his career in the newspapers, couldn't help myself. Governor of New York, vice president. Then McKinley got shot, and suddenly there he was, President of the United States, the man from San Juan Hill in the White House. He gave speeches about the strenuous life, wrote books about his adventures. That charge up Kettle Hill became legend, the defining moment of American manhood, they said. Proof of our national character. The painting hung in every schoolhouse showed Roosevelt on horseback leading brave men to victory. They left out the screaming, left out Collins with no legs, left out Charlie Younger dying of fever, left out the Spanish boys we killed, left out how many of us never really came home. Every Rough Riders reunion, they'd invite me. I went to a few in the early years. Roosevelt would be there, holding court, telling the stories, reliving the glory. The other men ate it up, laughed at his jokes, raised glasses to the old days, talked about how it was the best time of their lives. I stopped going after 1905, couldn't take it anymore, couldn't watch them celebrate what had destroyed me. When Roosevelt died in 1919, the whole country mourned. Great man, they said, American hero. Led the charge up San Juan Hill, lived the strenuous life until the very end. I read the obituaries in a boarding house in El Paso, and I got drunk for 3 days. Not because I loved him, because I hated him for never understanding, for never seeing what that charge had cost the rest of us, for turning our trauma into his triumph, for getting everything he wanted out of that war, glory, fame, the presidency, while men like Collins and Charlie Younger got graves, and men like me got ghosts. You want to know what Roosevelt was like? He was brave, genuinely, absolutely brave. He would have died on that hill without hesitation if that's what it took. He wasn't a coward, and he wasn't a liar. But he was a man who could look at a field full of bodies and call it magnificent, a man who could watch boys die and call it the greatest day of his life, a man who turned suffering into stories and stories into a career. He saw glory where I saw graves. He found purpose where I found horror. And he never, ever understood the difference. I'm 54 years old now. Roosevelt's been dead 13 years. The world's moved on. Nobody cares about San Juan Hill anymore except in history books. But I'm still there, still climbing that hill, still killing that Spanish boy, still listening to Roosevelt call it magnificent. Some men come home from war. The rest of us just pretend we did. Roosevelt came home a hero. I came home a ghost. And meeting him, really meeting him on that hilltop in Cuba, taught me the cruelest lesson of all, that the same experience can destroy one man and make another, and neither one of you will ever understand how the other survived it.